This one's going to be a really fun podcast because we're going to talk about everything pertaining to chocolates. And I mean it, literally everything. Welcome to the Ketogeek podcast. Let's do this.
Health, nutrition, fitness, low-carb lifestyle.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Ketogeek podcast. Today, I am joined once again by the one and only
Corey Behn. Hello, everybody, once again.
And we are here, not so live, from Napa, California. And first of all, we have to apologize, everybody, for not doing a podcast last week. We were exceedingly busy, very, very busy doing one important, great thing. The greatest announcement of all time, Corey. And I have to say this, after 3 long years of blood, sweat, tears, chocolate, almonds, ghee, MCT oil, erythritol, monk fruit, all these ingredients, lots of science, we have finally finalized our energy pod. It is now in stock. We are selling them in singles. We have them in doubles. The boxes, interestingly enough, are sold out. Isn't that crazy?
It is pretty wild, especially with the new price increases, perhaps, man.
Yeah, the price has gone up a little bit, and we did touch about it in our last podcast to explain why things have gone a little crazy. Everything from our initial production line has doubled or increased in price. Even the cups literally have doubled in price that we use for our energy pods. Additionally, one of the biggest features about this new energy pods that people need to be aware of is we've added a process of conching to the energy pods. And people are going to find out what conching actually is in this show, in this exact show. And what it does is it takes the product and refines it further to a very small particle size. So now you get the energy pod with its maximum flavor and taste. And I have to say, man, and you had that one dessert last night. I will say this, I'm going to start challenging people on energy pod, the chocolate version versus one of the best or the better or the high-end craft chocolates that are out in the market. Because I think, and based on the initial feedback and reviews that we've been getting, this is like the apex of chocolate.
It's as if this new manufacturing process that we're using has made chocolate more chocolatey, as if that makes any sense, right?
You guys will just have to try it out. And we have the single packs available with free shipping at $7.95 that you can get to your doorstep. So if you believe in something being more chocolatey than chocolate, go get the Chocolate Fudge Energy Pod. Try it out. And one of the best ways we've figured out how to try it, Corey, what is it?
One of the best ways is to turn it into a dessert. Is my favorite. We tried something else yesterday, though, which was emulsify it into water, hot water, and made a ultra viscous hot chocolate, which was very interesting. Gave us some insight on our own product, and we're just going to continue it from there on.
Definitely. So we will continue to improve our product, but this is definitely, I'm proud and happy to say this is Energy Pod 1.0 after 3 years. And it's been a huge journey. We've learned so many different things. And this amazing, oh man, it's the texture. The texture is so good.
Now, why is that texture so good, man? Like, we got this new concher in our process. It's also known as a melanger. But now Energy Pod processing time is up to 2 days.
Yeah, it takes 1 day to make the ghee. And then it takes 24 hours plus to actually refine the particles that we add to the energy pod, the ingredients that we add to the energy pod, and bring them down to under 20 microns. And what that does is it basically removes the perception of the particles themselves. It polishes them at a very microscopic level. That's why if you try the new one, it's going to be freaking amazing.
And as opposed to the old ones, as you all have come to know and love and have supported us for many years now, that old one had quite a bit of texture to it, as if it was a unmixed brownie mix. And now this is like chocolate liqueur. It is so slick and so smooth. I thought we were making syrup now, and I was just totally tricked. But this just goes to show that we're always focused on the quality and the health above cutting corners when it comes to ingredients and science. We're looking to make the best of the best as far as your health and your taste buds are concerned.
And it makes sense. And you know why it makes sense? Because think about it this way. We did the last podcast and we found out that a third of produce is thrown away in U.S. households. And we also know that every year about $1,800 plus worth of produce is wasted. That's a lot of food going away. So the problem of our time is not a lack of food, at least not in the United States. It is the lack of quality foods. And that's the target we have. So we do not cut corners when it comes to the quality of our product. Now, there are going to be some people who will be like, what exactly are energy pods? That's a very good questions you guys are probably maybe asking. So the energy pods are 2-ounce cups, about 56 grams. They are these food emulsions that we make here at Ketogeek using the best ingredients we can find. You can think of it like a really exquisite craft chocolate, completely sugar-free. And it comes with a nice paperboard spoon. If you freeze it, it turns into like an ice cream texture. If you throw it into the refrigerator, which is my favorite way to consume it. And then it turns into like a pudding. At room temperature, it can be used as a dipping sauce. So you got different ways. It's like the Swiss Army knife of food. They are completely shelf stable. That's the coolest thing about it. They don't bloom a lot or at all compared to these chocolate bars that you buy. So there's a huge advantage right there. And once again, sugar-free. We use monk fruit and erythritol. They have a zero glycemic impact. If anything, they don't screw up your teeth like sugar does. They may even have protective capabilities. Well, monk fruit has some science when it comes to antimicrobial properties inside your mouth. So there's a win-win everybody. I can't believe, really, Corey, I can't believe we're able to come up with something that tastes flippin' amazing. The texture is phenomenal, and it has potential health benefits. And guess what? The new pod actually has 10 grams of protein. There's even more protein involved now.
Wow. This is starting to sound like something that the Aztecs and the Mayans and the Oltecs would call food of the gods.
It is the food of the... It is the food of the gods.
Right. And I think that we're going to be the new Quetzalcoatl's of the world and give people these foods of the gods. And they're not from gods, actually. They're from hardworking humans like you guys and people who are listening to our show.
And another thing we have to really mention over here is that we really support some good farming practices with our product. For example, even the paperboard spoon that comes with the energy pods, it supports regenerative forestry, which I think is great. The company is literally 40 minutes away from us down in Corte Madera, California. Our almonds that we source are here from California as well. So all of these things, guys, we really have to create a movement of better farming, a better environment. All of these things need to move together. We have cheap food products. That's not what we need anymore. We need high quality, ridiculously healthy food products for the public. And you guys are the ones that have the control here. The consumer does not usually know what's going on behind the scenes. And with this podcast and our future projects and everything that we talk about, we will delve into the heart of it. You guys will become smarter, healthier consumers with our product, with our podcast, and everything else. So anyway, we've talked about the energy pods quite a bit. People can buy them from Amazon. They can also buy it from our own website at ketogeek.com. They do come with a 2 to 3 day shipping. And if you're in California, local to us in the Bay Area, it's 1 day shipping a lot of the times. So it's really, really simple. So you also get a handwritten note from us a lot of the times.
It's really special. Absolutely. We're just trying to connect to our guests and our customers and let you guys know that we are humans just like you.
Yep. So go buy our energy pods. Leave us a review, even on this podcast. Leave reviews everywhere for us. And share the energy pods, if it's possible, with your friends and family. That would be a great way to spread the word out as well. I think that pretty much knocks out everything when it comes to energy pods, right?
So far, I mean, just stick with us in the future. Sign up for our newsletter. Stick with our podcast, YouTube channel, all of it. We are continually evolving as Ketogeek and Energy Pods, and you'll see more and more from us in the future.
Wonderful. I think with all of this being said, this podcast is really fun because I wanted to know everything possible about chocolate. I'm going to give a name drop as well. There's a guy called Dylan. He's from Manoa Chocolate. You can find his YouTube channel, and he also has a business. I learned quite a lot from watching his content, so you guys can check it out. He makes craft chocolate. His bars sell for $10 a bar, and from what he does, I'm gonna say it's probably worth it. I haven't tried it myself, but the guy's very smart and educated, good, genuine person. So we need more consumers like that who support high-end, high-quality products that create a movement and help other farmers as well. He uses some great practices. I didn't even know about direct trade till I got to know about this guy. I was like, oh, there's only fair trade and that's all you should get. But then he talks about direct trade with the farmers and all those different things. So it's great that we as Ketogeek have evolved. So this whole podcast is not just an evolution for us as well, but also for you guys listening to our podcast on this journey who buy our products and support us as well. All right. With all of this being said and done, Corey, there's 3 simple words left to say here.
Let's do this. For the history of chocolates, we're going to have to dial back the time all the way to 460 and 480 AD. This is back when Mayans drank cacao for ceremonial purposes or for their daily life. They grew cacao trees in their backyards and used the seeds from the tree to make a frothy and bitter beverage. As a matter of fact, they loved this froth so much, they would try to pour from a standing height to another cup onto the ground in order to agitate the drink itself and create as much froth as possible. And even with this froth, it was a bitter beverage, so it wasn't really for everybody. And we'll learn a little bit more about that as we go down. In the 15th century, Aztecs gained control of Mesoamerica, and with that, they also adopted cacao into their culture. They associated chocolate with the god. I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, but we'll try it anyway. Quetzalcoatl, of life, light, wisdom, and day and light. He looked kind of like a feathered serpent. This is what he looked like and was usually depicted wrapping itself around one of the grand temples that the Aztecs had built. This god named Quetzalcoatl was also cast out by other gods for sharing chocolate with the humans. Sounds like Adam and Eve. They also thought that the removal of the pod was similar to the removal of the heart from the human body. Talk about some weird sacrificial stuff. The Aztecs, contrary to the Mayans, who drank their chocolate warm, drank it cold, and seasoning it with tree petals, pepper, allspice, vanilla, and honey to make the bitterness a little bit more palatable and perhaps that frothiness to bring forth those beautiful aromatics that they added to chocolate. Additionally, Aztecs could not grow the cacao themselves, so they had to import it as a luxury item. Cacao was so coveted that under the Aztec rule, cacao beans were used as a currency or as a tax payment in the form of a tribute. For instance, one turkey could be traded for 100 cacao beans, or one avocado was priced at 3 of those beans. Pretty strange times, right?
How many cacao beans were necessary to buy a Tesla?
About 9,000, of course.
9,000.
Yes.
Over 9,000.
Over 9,000. Both Mayans and Aztecs associated cacao with human sacrifice and concocted the chocolate drinks with sacrificial human blood. They kind of liked the look of having red-stained lips after drinking sacrificial blood, so they would actually flavor some later down the road, flavor their cacao drinks with achiote. I'm pretty sure I'm butchering that pronunciation, but it was an herb that produced a red pigment, and they would drink the cacao with this herb in it to kind of mimic drinking sacrificial human blood, which was also seen as like kind of a vitality thing to this ancient culture. In 1528, a Spanish chronicler described chocolate as the Aztecs as because those people are so fond of drinking human blood, to make this beverage seem like blood, they add a little achiote so that it turns red, and a part of that form is left on the lips and around the mouth. And when it is red for having achiote, it seems a horrific thing because it seems like blood itself. Well, it kind of reminds me of how food manufacturers today are utilizing beet juice and plant-based burgers to mimic the bleeding effects of a rare or medium rare burger made from beef. How does that make you feel, Fahad?
Well, if it fits your boat, I guess it's fine. I think, well, I guess the vegans just want to eat the beef really bad.
Maybe it's just the blood signifying some sort of vitality to our old reptilian brains. I don't know. Maybe we can bring someone in the future on this podcast who can talk more about the neuroscience versus blood. Anywho, until the 16th century, the Europeans had never heard of or come across chocolate until Hernan Cortés drank the frothy drink as part of an after-dinner routine of Montezuma, the then emperor of the Aztecs. Meanwhile, on August 15th, 1502, Christopher Columbus and his son Ferdinand came across the cacao beans on Columbus's fourth mission to the Americas, when he and his crew captured a large canoe, which was loaded with cacao beans for trading. Later, in the 16th century, José de Acosta, a Spanish missionary who lived in Peru, wrote the influence of cacao on the Spanish in the following words. Although bananas are more profitable, cacao is more highly esteemed in Mexico. Cacao is a smaller fruit than almonds and thicker, which toasted do not taste bad. It is so prized among the Indians and even among the Spaniards because it is a dried fruit that can be stored for a long time without deterioration, and they bring ships loaded with them from the province of Guatemala. It is serves as a currency because the 5 cacaos you can buy one thing, or with 30 another, and with 100 something else, without there being contradiction. And they give these cacaos as alms to the poor who begged for them. The principal product of this cacao is a concoction which they make that they call chocolate, which is a crazy thing treasured in that land, and those who are not accustomed are disgusted by it because it has a foam on top and a bubbling like that of feces, which certainly takes a lot to put up with. Anyway, it is the prized beverage which the Indians offer nobles who come to or pass through their lands, and the Spaniards, especially Spanish women born in those lands, die for black chocolate. This aforementioned chocolate is said to be made in various forms and temperaments, hot, cold, and lukewarm. They are wont to use spices and much chili. They also make it into a paste, and it is said that it is a medicine to treat coughs, the stomach, and colds. Whatever may be the cause, in fact, those who have been reared on this opinion are not appetized by it.
Yeah, cocoa, man. It was like I'm listening over here, and people literally died for cocoa chocolate. Oh man,
we sure did. Yeah, absolutely.
At least we don't have to do blood sacrifices for every energy pod sale.
Yeah. Maybe we can make blood pod one day with achiote and just throw it in there.
Limited edition Christmas special for the amazing sacrifice that happens once a year on 25th. Oh man, that would totally screw us up.
Maybe our fans would adore us even more, and it seems that Instagram loves dramatic stuff like that. So. Maybe for Halloween, who knows?
For Halloween, a blood pod.
It sounds absolutely disgusting.
It needs to be made with beet juice.
Perfect.
For the
just
vegans.
Like those plant-based burgers.
Yeah.
I've always wanted my pods to bleed.
I ain't got time to bleed.
Back to history of cacao. When Columbus first brought cacao back to Spain, chocolate had no impact until the Spanish friars introduced it to the Spanish court. When the Aztec Empire was conquered by the Spanish, chocolate was imported regularly and became a favorite beverage at the court. Alongside original additives by the Aztecs, such as pepper and honey, the Spanish added sugar and vanilla to counter the bitter taste of chocolate. There's a very interesting thing going on here. You started with people in Aztecs. It was revered by everybody from all the way down to the peasants and all the way up to royal kingship and the court. And then we kind of look at how it transferred from the peasants and what the Spaniards saw the Aztecs as. They weren't the highest civilization because the Spanish thought they had the highest civilization going on. For gosh sake, they had huge boats that brought them across the Atlantic Ocean to their land. So, of course, you'd feel kind of superior in that notion. It is interesting that once the Spaniards arrived in Mesoamerica, it was mostly just men. And what that meant for the men is that they had to start families with the local women there. And so the local women and the men made children, and those children became functioning members of a society later on in Mesoamerica and in Spain. And eventually cacao started rising through the populace of the Spaniards, from the peasants, the folks who were mating with the Aztecs and creating children here. Their children were fighting in the armies, and then chocolate became widely available, made to those army soldiers in the form of wafers that were very easy to dissolve in water. And from that, it passed up into nobility and finally found its way to the highest echelons of society. So the way that the Spaniards brought their men into the society of Aztecs, and the Aztecs chocolate their product, something that was once seen as absolutely disgusting and revolting in the Spanish community because it was just frothy, it reminded them of feces, it was bitter. It became a drink of royalty.
Oh, it always seems to happen. Reminds me of the interesting story of sugar, how initially when refined sugar first came out into the public, it was this royal, important, amazing thing with only a few people having access to it. But over time, because of how the Industrial Revolution had a role to play here and how trade worked, eventually it's the other way around now. Now people want a raw form of sugar compared to the refined form of sugar. It's like things get really crazy. And the same goes for some certain organic foods as well. At one point, people thought that they were supposed to be eaten by poor people, but now it's the other way around. Like now it's a status symbol when people eat a lot of organic food. So society has this interesting dynamic of going up and down with certain food products, above the social ladder and lower.
Yeah, it's like the great food rebound.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating how it works.
Absolutely. By 1602, chocolate had exploded in popularity to Austria. And in 1662, Pope Alexander VII stated that religious fasts were not broken by consuming chocolate drinks.
I think that answers the question for whether coffee breaks your fast.
Nah. I think we're fine.
If Pope Alexander the Seventh says that chocolate does not break the fast, I'm pretty sure coffee does not break the fast either. That's the logic.
That sounds like an N=1 observation to me, but we'll go roll with it. It was Pope Alexander.
How dare you defy Pope Alexander the Seventh?
Now, within 100 years of coming to Europe, chocolate was a mainstay. It became infected in every single part of society. The dark side of this growth was that a slave market between the early 1600s and the late 1800s, because of the processing of cacao beans, was slow and required manual work. So no one really wanted to do this stuff. It was very difficult, super duper labor intensive, especially to produce the amount of chocolate to meet the demand in New World or Old World Europe. You can call it from the Europeans' perspective. Cacao plantations were spread through the English, French, and Dutch colonies, so they couldn't really import so many slaves over because the slave trade started to get cracked down on. So cacao plantations were being brought over to these colonies. Rather than try to spearhead for more slavery, they decided to grow their own plantations. Sadly, because of this, many Mesoamerican workers dying due to illnesses and cacao production was the work given to the poor wage laborers and the African slaves that were on these plantations that were brought over to the English, French, and Dutch colonies. Meanwhile, wind-powered and horse-drawn mills helped improve production, while new processes such as heating up the mill in 1732 by the French sped up the extraction of cacao. Go industrialization and production.
Industrialization, I have to say, is one of the best things that has happened in the human history. Besides the Bronze Age, the Stone Age, the Iron Age, and all of these big hallmarks, I think the Industrial Revolution was amazing. Like, along with the Renaissance, and now I would say the Information Age with the computer. I think you can just see how innovation just breeds and improves lives.
Yeah, the mother of all this seems to be automation. Within the United States or Americas, the first chocolate company was found in 1765 in Boston, which was called the Baker Chocolate Company, and was founded by Dr. James Baker and John Hannon. At that point, they primarily made Baker's chocolate using cacao beans from the West Indies, and the business is still going strong to this day. You may even see these things stocked up on, I've seen it last in the Safeway, stocked up on the top shelves and sold as baking chocolate by the Baker Company.
Really?
Absolutely.
So they're pretty much holding very strong.
They're going for it. It's good stuff. And I'm pretty sure all of your home bakers are familiar with the Baker Chocolate Company name.
So that's the first chocolate company. Whenever you go buy their product, you can just think of it that way.
That's a really cool piece of history, most definitely. In 1815, during the Industrial Revolution, a Dutch chemist by the name of Coenraad van Houten, too bad he wasn't an owl, I stole that joke, introduced alkaline salts to chocolate, which reduced its bitterness. A few years later, in 1828, he also created a press to remove half of the cacao butter from the pure cacao extract, or the cacao liquor, which made chocolate cheaper and more consistent in quality. This new type of chocolate was called the Dutch cacao. When you hear about Dutch chocolate or Dutch cacao, this is what they're talking about. You'll notice that Dutch cacao isn't as tangy or as aggressive. At Ketogeek, we use partially Dutch cacao for our energy pods, though this can vary depending on the batch and how we want to evolve the product so that we can share only the best with our customers. Suffice it to say, this Dutch cacao transformed chocolate making forever, as in 1847, an English chocolatier Joseph Fry discovered a way to make chocolate moldable by mixing cacao powder with sugar and cacao butter. So they were removing cacao butter, keeping this on the side, and then adding it back in as a process of their manufacturing of chocolate.
Another historical fact, we went back in time, in history, in a time machine, and we showed them the energy pods. That's what it gave him the inspiration.
So in a way, we inspired each other, and energy pods were born.
Stephen Fry was my neighbor, man. I mean, Joseph Fry, not Stephen Fry. Stephen Fry is the author.
Yes.
I mean, I always forget they probably were twins. I bet they were twins.
We'll have to trace the Fry lineage all the way back to the chocolate days.
I know Joseph's mom.
Well, at Ketogeek, here in the present day, we do use a similar method, and instead of using just cacao butter, we use ghee and MCT oil, local blanched almonds from California, and various other infusions and additives to create a much bolder and richer chocolate experience, which extracts a fuller body of chocolate compared to cacao butter as the only fat. And to that regard, I think I have to say that the natural warmth and nuttiness of ghee, it beautifully complements chocolate.
And that's what I found out when we first made the first few renditions of the energy pods. Even without the melanging and conching process, which further refines it, we were noticing that the chocolatey flavor was way more pronounced, way louder and expressive. But doing that conching process just takes it to a whole new level. And the good thing is the chocolate flavor stays. It stays for a while. That's the good thing about the energy pods, I've noticed. So you don't necessarily have to have cocoa butter as the only sole carrier for flavor. So that's very important to sort of distinguish and note over here. At least we noted that.
Right. And to the regard of how the chocolate flavor sticks around, I remember you made an observation, Fahad, that if you just take a little bit and spread it on your tongue, it sticks around forever.
Yeah, that's the best way to consume it. So when you get an energy pod, try to savor it slowly by putting a little dab on it on the spoon that comes with it, and then just sort of marinate it on top of your tongue, and you will find it a much more pronounced and longer experience. And then this way, you're just going to have tiny bits of energy pod throughout the entire day. So that was something really cool that we observed on ourselves. In fact, we should make a guide online, a video showing people how to eat an energy pod. People have actually asked that question so many times. How do I eat this thing? Because they don't know what it is.
Well, the people have spoken, and I think we have some work to do then.
Indeed.
Over time, Joseph Fry's chocolate factory in England mass-produced the chocolate bars, Fry's chocolate cream, in 1866. Milk was occasionally added to chocolate beverages since the 17th century, but in 1875, Swiss chocolatier Daniel Peter invented the first milk chocolate by mixing in powdered milk developed by Henry Nestle. That sounds like a household name.
There's going to be plenty of those.
With the chocolate liqueur. Chocolate liqueur is the pure cocoa extract that you get from grinding cacao beans. In 1879, the texture of the chocolate was improved by Rudolf Lindt. That's another name we recognize.
They're all family, man.
Who invented the conching machine, which agitates, mixes, distributes, and polishes particles within the chocolate. I think Fahad and I were really inspired by Rudolf Lindt, without really knowing who Rudolf was, by eating products that he created so many years ago, Lindt Lindor chocolates.
Yep, and when we had the Lindt bar, and we compared it to Valrhona, and we compared it to Ghirardelli, we did all of those samples. We tried all the high-end bars that we could find. We even went to food shows and tried different bars as well. One of the big problems that I noticed at that time was that a lot of them were not as smooth, but Lindt, they nailed the smoothness. Now, the problem here is that because the Lindt, please don't sue me or something, but Lindt bars, the problem I have with them is that they're processed for such a long time that they are smooth, but they've lost practically all their flavor, or a lot of the flavor is gone. It's not as aggressive or potent or chocolatey. It's earthy and somewhat devoid of the flavors that are natural to cocoa. Now, what I mean by ridiculously strong flavors, just try a natural cocoa powder, just put it in your mouth and just have a dab of it, and you're going to notice how aggressive that is. And now compare that with, for example, Lindt, and you're going to find out that it's just a totally different ball game over there. So there's a sweet spot over here where you get to express enough flavor without being so gritty and ridiculously encumbering to your mouth. And all of these things, once you consider into it, I mean, we started learning about all of this for 2-3 years. It's been a long journey for us till we got to the final grinding phase, which we finally implemented to seal the deal with our product. And that's why we were forced to bump up the prices for energy pods, because it's the quality of ingredients, the processing, small batches, individually handpicking everything, factoring the health research that we're doing at the same time, using sugar-free sweeteners. Oh, man, crazy stuff.
Yeah, this is it's been quite the journey, and we're now using conching and grinding together. It's done in a machine called a melanger, which a lot of chocolatiers use, and run it for days at a time. 48 hours is an average. It can take up to 78 hours to complete, though, depending on what your texture is looking for. But because we have done this, I think that the energy pods are now more flavorful than all chocolate bars that we've come across so far.
I think so. I know it's a very bold statement, but we are open to someone sending us links, or write us and tell us in the comments what kind of chocolates you want us to try, but only on the condition that you try our chocolate and tell us how that compares to that chocolate first. So then we can go out there and go out hunting.
Yep. We like to get new bounties of chocolates.
Yeah, we have really become food nerds by now.
Oh, we're going to switch Napa over to Chocolate Haven. No more wine country, y'all.
Or work with them. Wine and chocolate. Everybody wins.
Yes, yes, yes. Back to the invigorating history of chocolates. Other than Nestle, Several new chocolate companies started in the late 19th and early 20th century. Rowntree's of York started in 1862. Cadbury in England started in 1868. Cadbury also manufactured their first Easter egg in 1875 by realizing that they could mold cacao butter. In 1893, Milton S. Hershey, another name we all know, purchasing equipment at the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago and started creating chocolate in Chicago. White chocolate was first introduced in the U.S. in 1946 by Frederick E. Herberts of the Herbert Candies in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, near Boston, after he tasted white coat candies while traveling to Europe. And white coat is similar to white chocolate, but it's made from vegetable oil rather than cacao butter. It's much easier to work with and easier to mold, and when it comes to candies and that sort of application.
What's interesting, just to add a side note over here, that a lot of white chocolate that you buy from companies, a lot of companies, including Hershey's, you'll notice that they're pretty much white coats. They're not even white chocolate anymore. They don't have cocoa butter in them. They have hydrogenated vegetable oils. So you can call them white coats rather than a white chocolate now. See, you're getting smarter as consumers.
The white coats are coming. Now, I would like to add on to this this epic history that we just went over. We went over many household names there. Cadbury, Hershey's, Lintz. We learned about these great people like Daniel Peter, who created milk chocolate. These are all people thousands of years in the making, refining and creating chocolate. And it's just absolutely wonderful to be a part of that lineage, Fahad. Like, we're chocolate makers.
Yes, and we will distinguish the difference between a chocolate maker and chocolatier in a bit as well. But yes, we would consider ourselves sort of in the line of a chocolate maker rather than a chocolatier. So yeah, it's a good spot to be in, and we're going to continue to improve our products and see what else is in store for us.
And speaking of improving, that's precisely what we do as humanity. We can see that from the history in the past 10 minutes, 15 minutes or so that we just spoke of. Chocolate was improved over time, every single time. At Ketogeek, we looked at how chocolate was made, and everybody's using cacao butter. They're using this type of fat. We decided to introduce new fats that were never used, ghee and MCT oil. So in a sense, we're kind of pioneering a new revolution in chocolate making here.
Yes, you're right. This is a moment to be gone down in time, not to sort of exaggerate everything. But as our brand continues to grow, and speaking of growing, I don't know if I mentioned it at the start of the show, but we're starting to get into wholesale and retail stores now. Now that that product is a lot more stable, we're going to start with downtown Napa and then sort of escalate from that point onward to different places across the globe. So it's going to be really interesting. And we're going to soon touch on a topic called the child labor pertaining to cocoa. And we're going to get into a little bit of the nuances as well. But I think that basically covers up the history and lays down another checkpoint in our future and history when it comes to our product being part of this narrative towards making better food products and chocolate specifically as well. So, guys and gals, the next topic we're going to cover is going to be the production of the chocolate or cacao. Corey, I can take this unless you feel you're feeling the mood.
We all know how much you love production and the processes of things, Fahad. So take it away.
All right, so I'll take over production and processing then, because I'm going to be the processor. Instead of the professor. It'll be the processor. God, that was a horrible joke.
Oh my God. I'm laughing because it's bad.
The Bad Joke Podcast. That's what we should name after we change our name away from Ketogeek. The Bad Joke Podcast. the Badad Joke Podcast.
The Badad. Oh my God. Make it stop.
Everybody's just turned off the show by now. Anyway, to the production we go. So what exactly is the cacao tree? The cacao tree is 4 to 8 meters long, tall, 15 to 26 feet tall in our U.S. systems. It's totally evergreen, native to the tropical regions of Americas, where its origins in the Amazon basin were, while other species were also found in Venezuela and transported by humans to South and Central Americas. The fruit of the cacao tree is called the cacao pod or the cocoa pod and is 15 to 30 centimeter, about 6 to 12 inches long, and 8 to 10 centimeters, about 3 to 4 inches wide, while weighing about 500 grams. That's about 1.1 pounds when fully ripe. Cacao trees need rich and well-drained soils and grow 20 degrees on either side of the equator while requiring 2,000 millimeters of rainfall a year, with temperatures ranging from 21 to 32 Celsius or about 70 to 90 Fahrenheit. Temperatures under 15 Celsius or 59 Fahrenheit are detrimental to its growth. So notice, Corey, this guy's really finicky about its growth.
It sure is, yeah. It has to be in a specific spot on the planet. It needs a very, very specific type of soil. And the temperature, too. We all know temperature is very temperamental.
Yep. And probably humidity has a role to play here, too. So there are 3 main varieties of cacao beans that are generally known by, well, I don't think most people even know about these kind of... Do most people know about them?
This is my first time hearing these terms, actually, when we started doing some deeper research on chocolate. I've never heard of these varietals.
Yeah, I didn't know about the varietals until I really did a deep dive into it.
I thought there was only like Guatemalan, there was the Ivory Coast chocolates, and I thought there was only Mexican chocolates, not what we're about to talk about right now.
Yep, this is fascinating. So there are 3 main varietals of cacao. First one is the Criollo. About 5% of cocoa beans these are supposed to be the most rarest and most expensive cacao, are native to the Central Americas and the Caribbeans and some South American states. They're very difficult to grow because of low yields and environmental threats. However, their flavor is very delicate and complex. It does have a lower chocolate flavor, but the notes that it expresses, the secondary notes, are much more exaggerated or longer in your mouth. The second varietal is the Forastero. This is most commonly grown bean and native to the Amazon basin. All African cacao is also made of this bean type. This can survive better in environments and are associated with traditional chocolate flavor, with shorter secondary notes compared to the Criollo. They also do produce a relatively bland chocolate. Highest yield of chocolate versus Criollo and Trinitario. Well, that's the third one. So Forastero is basically the most cheapest, most found about across the globe. Now, there is the Trinitario, which are hybrids between the Criollo and the Forastero that have originated from Trinidad, and when Forastero was brought to the local Criollo crop. Nearly all cocoa produced over the 5 decades is of Forastero or lower grade Trinitario varieties. The chocolates we use at Ketogeek are high quality Trinitario varietals. So the problem with the high end, as we talked about earlier, is because it's so finicky, it's very difficult to work with. And perhaps there might be agricultural nuances associated with Criollo that we don't want to be part of. Some controversies that could be there as well. So we're going with a safer bet, which is the Trinitario. A lot of good chocolates are made from this varietal. Additionally, the total distinct types of cacao is at about 10, actually, not just 3. These 3 are just the original ones, but they've added 7 more that are just derivatives of these original 3 musketeers. 2/3 of world's cacao comes from West Africa, with 43% from the Ivory Coast, where even as late of 2007, child labor is being used to produce these chocolates or cacao. This is important because 50 million people across the globe depend on cacao for sources of living. As of 2007, most chocolatiers purchase from these people and then package it into their own design. In a 2012 World Chocolatier Foundation report, the Ivory Coast was found to be the largest producer of cacao in the world. Chocolate makers use harvested cocoa beans and ingredients to produce couverture chocolate. Did I pronounce that right? Is that how you say it?
Couverture?
Couverture?
It's another French term that's just going to trip us up.
Oh, man. A few weeks ago, we were butchering biochemistry. This time, it's the French terms. So here's the difference, Corey, that we were talking about earlier. That the chocolate makers the difference between the chocolate makers and the chocolatiers is that the chocolate makers take the cocoa beans and the ingredients and they produce the couverture chocolate, while the chocolatiers then use these couvertures to make chocolates like candies, bars, and truffles and all those kind of things. So Ketogeek is technically a chocolate maker if we make a chocolate fudge energy pod. So, Corey, do you have anything else to add over here before we move on to the processing?
Not much else to add to that. We could do a full podcast on all sorts of types of species and cacaos, and I think we can just get into nitty gritty there.
Yep. Maybe that's something we could do in the future when we have our own chocolate factory or Ketogeek Energy Pod factory. Guys, that's our dream, by the way. Buy our product. We wanted to have a factory storefront in downtown Napa that we can have all of you people drop by and we can meet in person, hang out, talk to each other, and have tasty wine and chocolate.
Have chocolate tours, learn how chocolate's made, look at the manufacturing process that we use. We want to be transparent with you people and just show you everything that we've been working on.
That would be a dream come true. So let's buy our stuff. We need to get to the mark. We need to make that happen. You guys need to make it happen. So let's talk about the processing of the cacao. And many people might have heard this term, the beans to bar, or the craft chocolates. We will delve into this topic right now. Now, we talked about the trees. The trees have to be harvested, which is the first process to making chocolate. First, the cocoa pods are harvested by cutting them from the trees using a machete, or knocking them off the tree using sticks. The cocoa pods have to be fully ripe, or else unripe fruit will have a lower cocoa butter, or sugar in the pulp may not be enough for the next step of fermentation.
And I learned that the ripe versus unripe fruit, the unripened fruit are pretty green, and they grow right off the tree. And I've seen them grow off the trunk, on the branches, on the primary branches, on little branches, but they turn this beautiful yellow color, and that's when you know they're ripe.
Oh man, that's kind of awesome to know. When you harvest them, the pulp is then removed from the pod and then placed in large piles or bins. This leads us to the next process, which is fermenting. Inside these bins, microorganisms start fermenting the pectins. Yeast produces ethanol, lactic acid bacteria produces lactic acid, and acetic acid bacteria produces acetic acid. This process of fermentation can take up to 7 days and yields various precursors to the chocolate flavors exuded by the beans. This is where the expression is starting to happen.
Yeah, there's a cool video that I was watching on the fermentation side of chocolate, and it was being done by some Mexican farmers producing their own chocolate beans to be sold directly to consumers. But he was doing his ferment, and he was talking about, so when you look at a cacao, when you open up a cacao pod, for example, in it, you're going to be surprised. There is this yellow fleshy substance all over the beans, which is what you're actually after. The ferment takes care of this fleshy substance, and it turns it into food, basically, for all the acid, the bacteria that Fahad just mentioned. And what we're looking for in this ferment process is something I actually didn't know, and maybe you didn't know, Fahad, but in order to test the ferments, the Mexican farmer pulled one bean out of the ferment pod and cracked it open. Can you guess what color it was on the inside? It was
white?
Violet.
What?
It was purple, yeah. And he said this color is a good example of a good ferment happening. And then he held it close to his nose and he said it should smell a little like alcohol and a little like chocolate. And this is when you know your ferment is going really well. But I was so surprised to see that color.
I wouldn't expect violet.
Absolutely, yeah.
Chocolate's brown, bro.
Well, chocolate is royal, so is purple. Royal, chocolate, it all makes sense now.
Ah, that's why the kings were so keen on enslaving the world for chocolate.
They opened up pods and said, that's the color we want the world.
Take over the world.
Now open up an energy pod and get to your day, people.
The energy pod is definitely not purple.
No, it's not.
Unless we come up with some sort of a grape flavor, like a wild berry grape purple flavor.
Just call it Napa grape.
Yeah. Vintner's line.
Right.
I've thought about that one.
I like that.
Next step after fermentation is drying. In this step, the beans are dried quickly to prevent mold growth. Depending on the climate and weather, this can be done by laying the cocoa beans out in the sun for 5 to 7 days. After drying, the beans are transported to chocolate manufacturing factories. Then begins the process of roasting in these facilities, and it takes about 30 to 90 minutes with a temperature of 250 to 350 Fahrenheit, depending on the manufacturers. So some of the people that I've come across, they usually use a low temperature and per longer time to do that. Like the guy from Manoa, I think he uses a very low temperature with about 45 minutes of roasting. We at Ketogeek, we don't actually roast our beans yet. Maybe perhaps down the road, that would be really awesome to be able to roast the beans and add them directly to the energy pods. That would be epic. But slowly and surely, towards the factory we go. The next step is called winnowing, which involves removing the outer shell of the cocoa beans and is done very carefully so that the meat or the nibs of the cocoa beans are left perfectly or as much as possible intact. Now we move on to the step of grinding, which is done by these large specialized machines that convert the nibs into a liquid form called chocolate liqueur. The liqueur can be then further processed to create cocoa solids or the cocoa butter. Then we have the most amazing process of blending. The chocolate liqueur acquired from grinding is blended with cocoa butter of various amounts to make different types of chocolates and curvatures. For dark chocolate, sugar, cocoa butter, cocoa liqueur, and vanilla are combined. For milk chocolate, sugar, cocoa butter, cocoa liqueur, milk or milk powder, and vanilla are combined. For white chocolate, sugar, cocoa butter, milk or milk powder, and vanilla are combined. So there's no cocoa liqueur involved in here. There's no brown stuff. Lecithins, which function as emulsifiers, can also be added to improve the texture or the flow of the chocolate. Many bulk and industrial manufacturers use a very low amount of cocoa, down to even 7%, while not even using cocoa butter at all in their product. Instead, they use hydrogenated vegetable oils instead of cocoa butter. If you buy many of these chocolates in your most grocery stores, you're going to find every single or most of them just made with vegetable oils, hydrogenated vegetable oils. There's barely any made with cocoa butter because it's so difficult to work with. So you're going to probably have to look online to buy chocolates with cocoa butter a lot of the times.
Or shop at specialty food item stores.
Yep. It's a coveted item. So in bulk chocolates, they also use vanilla and vegetable oils to mask the poorly fermented and roasted cocoa beans because it's done in such a large scale without a lot of care.
I remember that gentleman watching, you showed me a video from Manoa Chocolates, and he was talking about chocolate almost as a wine, as a sommelier would talk about wine. It was very fascinating. He was tasting the chocolate and he could tell right away, this was poorly fermented. This wasn't correct. This wasn't fermented long enough. So there was some little nitty gritties that I had no idea what was going into the chocolate making at all.
Yep. So that's something that we're also getting very much into after trying so many different cocoa powders, because that's one of the main ingredients that we use. Eventually, I think we're going to start using cocoa beans, which will be way more epic. But that brings up a whole new challenge of its own. So we'll see. We're always experimenting and learning. Now, Actually, here's an important point to note over here. Nestle, Hershey's, and Archer Daniels Midland tried lobbying to change the definition of chocolate to partially hydrogenated vegetable oils instead of cocoa butter, along with using milk substitutes. FDA shot them down. So they tried, but failed. The next step in chocolate making is called conching, where the process of further refining of chocolate takes place. The particle size is then reduced down to under or about 20 micrometers. While the particles are polished and smoothened, the rough edges seem to go away with this. Before conching, the chocolate is usually very gritty and uneven in its texture, as some of our ex-customers might have noticed with our product as well. The previous versions were a little bit more gritty as well, but now no longer. Now they're just whoa. That's what we should be calling them. Whoa, pod.
It's kind of, I think of how Silver Surfer moves through space, like how he's just effortless and just glides. That's kind of like our chocolate now.
Yep, that's what conching does. Conching is done using sophisticated grinding machines called melangers, which can range from using granite stones to metal beads in a ball mill, which can each create a very unique result. This process can take anywhere from 8 to 72 hours. At Ketogeek, our current version uses about 24 plus hours per batch. And so it becomes really fine with our processing. It's also important to note over here that too much processing can be bad as well. As we pointed out earlier with the Lindt chocolate, there's chances of flavor just going away. You lose the chocolatiness. One of the main things I like about the energy pods was the fact that it expresses the chocolate flavor so well. So too much kind of may screw that up quite a bit. So 72 hours may be too much. So then when you're done with conching, you have to store the chocolate. Usually, this process involves taking the conched chocolate and putting it into large tanks at about 45 to 56 Celsius, where it stays as a liquid until it is ready to be tempered. Now, tempering is one of the most toughest and very subtle and intricate part of chocolate making, which makes it or breaks it for the chocolate. This process is very important when it comes to the product's stability, texture, and even the snap. So poorly tempered chocolates are not going to be as snappy. So as chocolate cools down from its storage temperature of 45 to 56 Celsius or 113 to 122 Fahrenheit, it starts crystallizing. And an uncontrolled crystallization process can create crystals of uneven size, which can leave the surface of the chocolate really matte. So if it's not shiny, it's probably poorly tempered. That's one of the signs you can see. The chocolate may also be very crumbly rather than snappy, while also lacking crispness. Now, chocolate has 6 different crystal phases, the cocoa butter specifically, and each of these crystal phases can melt at 17 Celsius, 21 Celsius, 26 Celsius, 28 Celsius, 34 Celsius, and 36 Celsius. At 17, 12, and 26 Celsius, the chocolate may melt too easy and may not have a good snap. At 24 Celsius, you start getting a better snap, but the chocolate still is very, very melty, melts really fast. At 34 Celsius, you get the best glossy, firm, snappy chocolate that melts at your mouth at 37 Celsius, which is your body temperature. At 36 Celsius, you do get a harder structure, but it is very impractical because it takes weeks to form. And Corey, this is very important because this is probably why the energy pods, after a week or two or so, they really settle down and become more firm compared to the liquidy, very liquidy state of a freshly batched. So if you get a very liquidy energy pod, you're going to notice that it is a very, something very new. It was just made days ago.
Very fresh. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, we also use ghee in our energy pod, and I think it also has its own crystalline structure and types of crystal formations. And that could be a topic for another day as well when we talk about ghee, which is also really fascinating. But as a side note, when you notice that some ghee is grainy, some is a little bit more runny, while the other is buttery smooth, it's the crystalline structures that are in play over here that cause the ghee to adopt a certain texture. Tempering can be done manually, but tempering machines do exist and they make the process a lot easier, especially the continuous tempering machine. Now, the last process, quote unquote, is basically the molding process. Though the uses of chocolate can be pretty much endless, there are some common forms in which it can be found in the market in the form of molds or different shapes. Chocolate bars are these rectangular blocks of chocolate that can be eaten as is. They can be used in cooking or baking. Some candy bars are also called chocolate bars, I suppose. So, chocolate chips also exist, which are these drop-like pieces of chocolate that are used for baking or garnishing. Chocolate pistoles. They basically look like little coins. And then you have the chocolate fève. It's a French word again, which is being butchered again, which looks like a gutted half almond. That's the best description I could come up with. It really does look like a gutted half almond. I thought about pecans first, like a gutted half pecan.
Yeah.
But almonds looks better. There are other forms as well, which include chunks, cubes, blocks, spheres, sticks, and curls. Another important thing to note over here is the shelf storage. Chocolate has to be stored between 15 to 17 Celsius or 59 to 63 Fahrenheit and under 50% humidity. So like the tree, the product itself is very, very, very picky. If under frozen or refrigerated conditions, chocolate can absorb moisture, causing white discoloration because of sugar crystals rising to the surface. When temperatures fluctuate too much or exceed 24 Celsius or 75 Fahrenheit, sugar starts blooming out of the chocolate. This blooming also happens when chocolate is kept under 15 Celsius or when humidity is high. So if it's too much or too little, it's going to bloom.
Yeah, we're walking on eggshells around this dramatic product.
Yeah, so chocolate making ain't a joke. It ain't a walk in the park.
Science, man.
Yup. Now, here's a good way to tell what kind of blooming it is. If you rub the surface of the chocolate, the whitened chocolate, the bloomed chocolate, and the blooming disappears, it is a fat blooming, not the sugar that is causing the bloom or the sweetener. Moving chocolate between extreme temperatures can destabilize the chocolate emulsion and result in an oily texture. Separation starts happening. With all of these being considered, chocolate is still safe to consume, and there's nothing wrong with blooming or any of these textural manipulations. It's totally fine. It's just a cosmetic thing, and some people may not like the texture. And the quickest solution to this is simply just temper the chocolate again, and you'll get rid of the blooming. So there's no issues right there except for just the potential texture.
So just separation of ingredients and disincombobulation. That's
Yes.
not even a word.
We just made it up. Chocolate can also absorb aromas from other foods, so it's best to be kept away from other foods and packaged properly under right temperatures and humidity, preferably in a dark place away from light. What is also interesting to note here is that our energy pods, because they use ghee, MCT oil, and various fats and other sort of additives, it's a lot more rugged and flexible when it comes to storage. At the same time, we still have a lot more to research over here. For example, one of the common things you and I talk about often is how does ghee and cocoa butter from the cocoa have an impact on the crystalline structures, because you're dealing with crystalline network of the ghee and also talking about the crystalline networks of the cocoa butter.
Right.
So
in my mind's eye, the way I see it is we're kind of seeking the holy grail of, and this is until we've actually dove into crystallization, the crystalline structures of fats in the phases that they go through. I kind of imagine it in my mind that's probably not going to work like this, but we're looking for cacao and ghee crystalline structures to fit each other like Lego pieces.
bingo. That's how what happens at a microscopic level. I think you can take over these next two topics, right?
Absolutely. So we're going to move into the types of cacao solids. There are a few here, and we're going to go ahead and describe them in full. So cacao beans, when ground, create cacao liquor, as mentioned before. When you remove the cacao butter from the liquor, you get cacao solids. Inside the beans, 46 to 57% of cacao beans is cacao butter. Cacao butter is powdered form of the dry solids along with some of the remaining amounts of cacao butter. Now there's two main types of cacao butter. You have natural cacao. This is produced when cacao fats are removed from the cacao nibs, and the remaining dry cacao is then ground to make cacao powder. The pH of this cacao powder is 5.3 to 5.8, slightly acidic, and has a light brown color. In many recipes, baking soda is used alongside natural cacao, which neutralizes the acidity of the natural cacao powder while creating carbon dioxide, which helps the baked goods to rise.
That's really fascinating.
Absolutely. It's a double function going on there. If you will, it's a natural rising agent on its own. It is also has a more fruity, tangy, and more aggressive flavor profile versus Dutch cacao, Dutch processed cacao, or Dutch cacao. Dutch processed cacao or Dutch cacao is a cacao powder that has been treated with an alkalizing agent to make it darker and neutralizes its pH. This process also yields a milder taste and cuts down on tangy and aggressive notes, which is why it is used commonly in ice creams, hot chocolate, baked goods, and most modern chocolates. Solubility is also increased by Dutching, which makes it more friendly towards use in beverages, which is why when Dutching was first discovered way back in the history of cacao, Dutch cacao is super duper popular for mixing into water, just hot water to make hot chocolate versus just using natural cacao, which didn't mix quite well. So that's why we have Dutch cacao. So we can have chocolate in water to make hot chocolate without having to do further processing. This is the kind of cacao we primarily use in Ketogeek for our energy pods, as well as we've used in the past natural cacao, which we have taken a huge liking to Dutch cacao since we've had our hands on both types.
And if what's also interesting is we remember at the time where we used a fully Dutched cacao, which turned our energy pod into like a totally black concoction, which was amazing.
Yeah, the pigment was very black.
Yeah, the pictures looked phenomenal. Mm-hmm. And it had that sort of Oreo alkaline taste to it.
Yeah, it was an unmistaken Oreo flavor.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. I would love to see what happens when you take the black cacao or the fully Dutch cacao, I'm going to call it black cacao, and put it into the energy pods just for a test drive and see what happens to the flavor and texture. What are we going to get? Is it going to be like a lava taste? Is it going to be like a more soapy taste? I don't know.
Who knows? Maybe we'll pronounce the flavor of that Oreo flavor even more with ghee, because we know that ghee is not used in Oreos.
Yep. So that's an experiment for the future.
Absolutely. Interestingly, flavonols are reduced during Dutching, but the health benefits of flavonols can be ignored to a large extent unless you're consuming very, very large doses of these flavonols, which may not even be high enough in normal consumption of chocolate. Gosh, imagine trying to eat in one day all the chocolate you've consumed in your lifetime just to get those antioxidants, man.
That's the same logic they use for wine.
Fit wine.
Wine is great for you. Look at the health benefits of wine. But then the researcher posts a tweet saying that, it does require a full barrel to consume it. I'm not sure if you're going to drink the entire barrel in one sitting. Right.
And good luck, because maybe everything is going to crap out even before the alcohol destroys your system.
Yeah. So that's the one important thing to note here. And I think we're going to touch a little bit on the nutritional value in a little bit, just a tiny bit. But these flavonols and antioxidants, their claims are overblown to a large extent. So
yeah. Well, now we have the types of chocolate that humanity has come up with, and I'm happy to cover these topics, Fahad, unless you have a serious passion for white chocolate.
I have a passion for everything, but you can take over it.
Absolutely. So we have the very first thing that maybe all of us as children have consumed. One of the very first chocolate treats we're all given is probably going to be milk chocolates. Milk chocolate is considered the sweetest chocolate and contains milk powder or condensed milk. In the UK or Ireland, milk chocolate must contain a minimum of 20% cacao solids, while in the rest of the European Union, it is 25% cacao solids. In the USA, milk chocolates have to be 12% or above.
That's so funny.
I've heard somewhere that the EU does not even consider Hershey's to be chocolate under this rule here.
I wouldn't be surprised if the OG Hershey's is in his grave rolling around. I was like, God damn it.
What have you guys done? It's supposed to be 25%.
This is not chocolate, bro.
Oh, man. White chocolate. It sounds like a conundrum, but here we go. White chocolate is similar to milk and dark chocolate, but it has no cacao solids in it. It's called white chocolate because it uses cacao butter, which is found in cacao pods and is separated from chocolate to make chocolate liqueur. So it's still technically a chocolate in some sort of sense. So it doesn't contain cacao butter, milk solids, or any sweeteners. Dark chocolates. Now you're talking my language. Dark chocolate is made by adding fat and sugar to cacao liqueur. European rules specify that dark chocolate must have at least 35% cacao solids in it, while the USA, the chocolate must contain at least 15% chocolate liqueur. Higher than these numbers make the chocolate more bitter. There are 3 different kinds of dark chocolates. I bet none of you guys knew what this is.
Yeah, this was so really fascinating, knowing about these 3 different types. You see them in the store all the time.
Right.
But you just don't know what it means.
We never really, you see 50%, you see 60%, 70%. Well, let's really break it down and talk about what this means. So the 3 types, you have sweet dark chocolate. This will contain at least 15%, as the USA dictates, chocolate liqueur, and the mildly dark chocolates contain 15 to 35% cacao content. Then you have semi-sweet dark chocolate, and generally we see this in chocolate chip cookies. You guys may be familiar. They're usually sold as morsels, chunks, or chips for making chocolate chip cookies and baked goods, but can be purchased in a bar form. They must contain at least 35% chocolate liqueur, and the content of cacao must vary between 35% and 49%. I really like having those little bombs of earthiness in the sea of buttery and sugariness of a cookie. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, they're one of the best things ever. One thing I've noticed in at least store-bought ones, just as a side note, that they're very gritty. They're not as smooth, I've noticed. They're just not appetizing unless you add it to a cookie.
Another thing I've noticed with store-bought ones is that you're more likely to see a bloom on these things. I don't know if you've noticed that in our bought goods, but there's a slight white residue on every chocolate chip I've ever consumed in my life.
Now that you mention it, I think you're right.
Yeah. Maybe it's due to the smaller surface area, so the sugar has more time to rise, or whatever's blooming first, the sugar or the fats. And also the fact that these chocolate chips like Nestle, they're all over, and Hershey, all over the United States in all sorts of different temperaments.
Well, for a start, they don't even have cocoa butter in them a lot of the time.
Yeah, vegetable oil.
There's just hydrogenated. Like when I was doing research for chocolates, I realized the first thing. That's not cocoa butter in any of these. It's hydrogenated vegetable oils.
That's no chip. It's a trap.
It's a tarp.
Now, finally, we move on to bittersweet dark chocolates. This is the dark chocolate that contains at least 35% chocolate liqueur. Most bittersweet chocolate bars have a cacao content between 50 and 100%. This is also the most intense chocolate flavor, save for the chocolate fudge energy pod, which gives more flavor rather than nuking your palate with bitter compounds.
Yep, we had to say that. It's
the power of processing.
Yeah.
You're removing all the things you really don't want, and you're only keeping the things that you really want and turning it into an even better product.
Yeah, it's just crazy. And I think this brings us to a very important point here, just to kind of segue here, that these kind of denominations that we just talked about, they don't really apply to our product or many of the sugar-free products. Because let's say if you make a stevia sweetened chocolate bar or a monk fruit sweetened bar or even our product, then these calculations are done by mass percentages. But stevia, or any of these monk fruit or these low-weight sweeteners are 200 to 300 times sweeter than chocolate. And so you can have a 99% chocolate bar that's sweeter than a 70% chocolate bar because of the sweetener that's been added. And you can still be uber bittersweet dark chocolate. So that just makes literally no sense in the modern context.
Right. And because we're using sweeteners rather than sugars, we get a product that's not going to be as obesogenic as other products on the markets.
Yep. So we really have the best of all worlds going on.
Absolutely. So now we have unsweetened chocolates. So this is one of the last final forms that the world recognizes today, but we'll talk about the very, 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 very last version of chocolate, which will be, you've probably already heard of it. So unsweetened chocolate is pure chocolate liqueur, grounds from roasted and ground beans. It is also known as bitter or baking chocolates. It has a very strong chocolate flavor. It is usually combined with sugars and sweeteners, or sweeteners. Raw chocolate is dark, and it has a minimum of 75% cacao.
That's high.
Very, very high. Poorly tempered or not tempered version of this chocolate can have white spots called chocolate bloom, which are safe to consume, as Fahad explained earlier, because it's sugar or fat separating from the cacao solids, which can happen due to poor storage as well. We touched on that with our poor Nestle chocolate chips as well. Now, that very final version of chocolate that will be recognized by the
universe.
Yes.
Is the chocolate fudge energy pod.
And the chocolate fudge energy pod is a emulsion of cacao powder, blanched almond flour, as you guys know, ghee, MCT oil. We can talk to our blue in our faces about the energy pod, but this is a new type of chocolate, everybody. We're just trying to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, you can't just be like a kid who has no home. We need to find a home with our product. We need to know where we belong. So the energy pod needs a home.
Yep.
So tell us where we belong. I think, come to think about, if when I did some mathematics and calculations on it, I think we lie on the spectrum of above milk chocolate, but sort of in the sweet dark chocolate zone with the current version of the energy pods. Now we might come up with a much darker version, which may mimic close to a 60 to 75%. But like I said, these denominations don't really apply to us because of the sweeteners and everything that we're using. So, but it gives people a good reference of our product.
Yeah, we're using multiple processes to make our product in-house, as you know. We make our own ghee, we make our own proprietary sweetener blend that goes into the chocolate pod. And now we're actually in-house grinding this into a very near undetectable grain size on your tongue. It's quite fascinating.
I have to say, though, that our product does use slave labor when we work at 2 a.m. in the morning and doing production. Does feel like it sometimes.
A little bit.
I remember those days when we were doing production. Was it Keto Crate?
Yes.
We did it for Keto Crate. And we were up till 2 a.m.? Close to?
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, we were up to 2 a.m.
We were
doing
cleaning up and leaving the commissary by about 2 in the morning.
That did feel like slave labor.
Yep, but that's just two guys who are just serious and passionate about what they like to do.
We even had help during that time, and we had to let the helpers go, but we two stayed there forever.
Yep. Lots of love into this.
But you know what? That's called memories.
Yes. And the good memories of listening to strange theme songs and
oh man, our production facility turned into a Disney theme park.
Yes.
There's like Let It Go playing in the background. There was
shout out to Chef Mark Raymond for sticking it with us and being, steeping in our weirdness.
Was he a New Zealand or an Aussie dude? Something like that. He had that accent.
I believe he's New Zealand, but Mark, you can correct us if we're wrong.
Dude, backstage chefs have the best sense of humor.
They do.
And they have the best taste when it comes to Mexican food, not gonna lie.
Indeed, especially here in California.
They know about the best taco trucks in your city. Just ask them.
Yeah. Oh, man.
So we can talk a little bit about the nutritional aspect of chocolate, which I think we are technically supposed to be a nutrition podcast. Honestly, chocolate is just a happy thing people should enjoy. And the nutrition should be kind of secondary. But for some people, it may be primary. But we can talk. I can delve into it.
I think we can take a poll. And honestly, I feel like people eat chocolate for flavor than health reasons is going to be at the very top of the list here. What do you think? I
think you're absolutely right over here. Now, it does have some nutritional value, and we can definitely engage with that topic right now. The good thing about chocolates is that specifically chocolates that are high in cocoa and low in sugar can be quite a good source of saturated fat, specifically palmitic and stearic acid, along with oleic acid, which is an unsaturated fatty acid. They're also an excellent source of riboflavin, vitamin B12, manganese, phosphorus, and zinc, while a good source of calcium, magnesium, and iron. So these results of nutrition values can be somewhat interpolated into an energy pods, considering how much cocoa we do add to our product. The health aspects of chocolate do warrant a podcast on its own if we really want to go hardcore into it. They do also contain some bioactive compounds such as caffeine and theobromine, which can improve mood and focus. But these compounds can be very toxic to animals such as cats and dogs, so don't keep them around them because of these reasons. The lead concentration in cocoa or chocolate is the lowest among in food, but during the transportation, emissions from leaded gasoline that are still used in some developing countries can absorb into the chocolate. So you have to be very, very careful about where you source your chocolate. And this could lead to lead consumption, especially in kids. What's alarming to note over here is that even in a 10-gram dark chocolate bar, you can have as much lead as 20% of your daily lead oral limits. So it can be pretty toxic depending on where you get the chocolate. Some people may also be allergic to chocolate or cacao, with many preliminary research pertaining to cardiovascular disease and cognitive functions happening. So we don't know for sure, but there's some pretty interesting research going on. 5 grams of dry unsweetened cocoa powder has 12 milligrams of caffeine, and 25 grams or about 1 ounce of dark chocolate has 22.4 milligrams of caffeine. In comparison, a 7-ounce cup of coffee has 80 to 175 milligrams of caffeine. So there's not a lot of caffeine, but there is some. Cocoa also has a very high amount of antioxidants and flavonoids, which may have some potential benefits. Now, the next topic is very interesting and important to talk over here, because it's not just about the money. It also has to be about the agriculture and the impact on society, culture, and people as a whole. And the topic is the child labor with what that comes with cocoa harvesting. Corey, I think that's a good topic we can engage with, at least touch a little bit on over here. So one of the most controversial parts of chocolate making is concerns regarding child labor in the Ivory Coast, the biggest producers of cocoa, where it is purported that 12,000 to 200,000 children may be trafficked or enslaved for harvesting cocoa. It is alleged that 30% of children under 15 in sub-Saharan Africa are child laborers for agricultural activities. Some large-scale producers do actually buy from Ivory Coast cacao. I'm going to try avoiding dropping names.
Yeah, we don't want to destroy things here.
It's a moment to improve, not paint a bullseye on people.
Right.
As of 2017, 2.1 million children in Ghana and Ivory Coast were involved in farming cocoa, carrying loads, clearing forests, and various agricultural activities. Many efforts have been made to reduce child labor and improve the working conditions in these places. For instance, in 2018, 26,000 farmers in Ivory Coast observed a 51% decrease in children doing hazardous jobs in cocoa farming. Various initiatives and organizations have been established targeting Ghana and Ivory Coast. However, due to the concerns with child labor and poor farming conditions, some chocolate producers began to engage in something called fair trade. You might have heard it and found it in your grocery stores as well, where the goal was to establish a direct link from the developing countries to the country to counter the unfair system. One of the ways was for farmers to join an agricultural cooperative, which would pay a fair price for their cocoa so farmers can afford food, clothes, and schooling. However, the problem with this system is that the larger portion of the money doesn't even go to the farmer themselves, but to the middle industry that monitors the fair trade. In fact, in 2014, an article in The Economist, it was noted that fair trade farmers have a lower standard of living than on similar farms outside of fair trade system. Hence, a few chocolate makers, including the guy from Manoa, by the way, they use something called direct trade with the farmer, which ends up being a little pricier, quite a bit pricier actually. Their bars are $10 per bar. But the farmer ends up getting paid well. In other words, it all depends, and fair trade may not be as good for the farmer as it is purported to be, and direct trade may be the best options. And right now at Ketogeek, we kind of don't have the ability to do fair trade, but over time, once we grow into a chocolate factory, we can directly work directly with the farmer and get the cocoa from them. We can get tons and tons of cocoa and bring them to our site, process it, and then just help the world a better place and reduce the child labor, improve the lives of farmers so that they can invest in the schooling of their children, and the children can then improve their farms, the lifestyles, and the agriculture, and together the world becomes a better place disregarding where you are. So, guys, these you might notice over here that this is all a symphony. Once again, we've always at Ketogeek treated everything with different moving parts connecting together to create a better world. We can't just point fingers at one person. For example, when I was in Pakistan, one interesting side note over here, there was child labor involved in making the footballs, the soccer balls that were used in World Cups. And there are some many nuances behind such trade and such work. And it's a sad world. The best we can do is, instead of forcing our way through certain barricades and creating bigger problems like middle industries over here with fair trade, some of the farmers are getting worse off. So instead of creating this kind of lifestyle, why don't we create an atmosphere of transparency? And as consumers that are much educated at this point, you guys are the ones that make the choice over here. The problem of our time, once again, we started the podcast with the same thing. The problem of our time is not a lack of food. It is the lack of quality food that supports good farming and ethical practices. We don't need to be eating tons and tons of chocolate at every food corner. We need good chocolate or cocoa that gives you a great experience in life, but at the same time, helps the world become a better place. That's the thing we need to focus on. That's all I got to say.
I have to agree wholeheartedly with that, Fahad. If you are acting locally, you're thinking globally, man.
The change begins with you, spreads out and expands into the universe, beyond the stars. Guys and gals, this was a very fun podcast. Corey, you were a blast. Great performance right there. And we both had a wonderful time excavating these topics. Guys and gals, once again, our new energy pod is out. Go buy it. It means a lot. Go buy one pod, try it out, see how you feel about it, and then buy some more if you like it. It comes with free shipping and supports so many good practices. We actually make sure that our cocoa is traceable. To the very least, we try to make sure that it's traceable to its original source. So we don't work with certain companies that may provide a much better price, but at the same time, they may be engaged in child labor or certain trafficking or slavery or something like that. So that's a very important thing for us. So once again, Corey, I think that's about it.
That's all I got to say, Fahad. It's been a great podcast, and I think we both learned quite a bit, as we always do, for these podcasts.
Indeed. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Subscribe, like, share, buy, purchase. You guys rock. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the show. You can visit us at Ketogeek.com to check out our premium, keto-friendly, and low-carb food products, including our infamous energy pods, made from the best ingredients we could find in the entire country. We also recommend signing up for our newsletter at Ketogeek.com/signup, where you get exclusive discounts, rewards, product announcements, and the latest content we are working on. You also get a 10% discount on your entire order when you sign up. Go to Ketogeek.com/signup to join the low-carb playground.